This is an evaluation I did back in 1985. It was telling me about personality traits and what I'd be interested in doing. They basically went ahead and told me I'd be good at analyzing figure stats and figuring out problem resolution to situations. I've been reading Statistical Abstract here over the years, and I've got a bunch of charts I've made up here from Statistical Abstract to identify problems we presently have in our society. If you take a look here, this is our GDP. You can see in 2000 what our GDP was, which was about 8.9. It's presently around 14, 15 trillion dollars GDP. But you can see it's leveled off. One of the things we have to do here is analyze what the problem is. Love Herman Cain, he says, first you gotta identify the problem. A lot of these problems we have are due to this and interference by government in the private sector. So I wanted to give you a little bit of information. This is housing. You can see how the norm was where we came up through the 80s, 85, 90, 95, and then we're coming up here and you can see how they wanted to go ahead and do the Community Reinvestment Act. But then we hit 2000, 2001, and we had a problem in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they said, we've got to hold in check Iran. So we need to finance this war to hold Iran in check, and the way to do that would be to go ahead and have Iran between two countries with our military on both sides of it. So to create revenue, they created a bunch of securities and housing by building a bunch of housing. But these numbers later on are going to be, I'm going to go into depth a little more about what really went on here with housing. What I want to talk about first is population in the world. Who we are, what we consume, and what's been going on over the last 15, 20 years, and why nobody wants to talk about it, because it's national security. We're 1/20th the population of the world. However, because we were these big oil producers in the very beginning, you can see here in 1960 to 1930 how we were the producers of oil. In the early 30s, we were producing more than half the world's oil. And then as the years gone by, the world's increasing more and more in consumption of oil. And you can see the consumption of oil going steadily up in the world. Now we need to talk about imports into the United States of America. This is very important. I showed you up to 1959 what was going on, and what we had was a lot of the oil being produced here in the United States. But then in 1960, because we became so industrialized, and you see your oil numbers down here from 1960 to 2004, and you can see how our rate of oil imports is growing. Well, nobody wants to tell you exactly how much that is, and I don't blame them, because there for a while we were importing 98% of our oil. We were totally vulnerable. And here's the nations we were importing oil from, and I have them listed here. And in the year 2000, no, it was 1990, I think. Well, we've almost doubled our consumption of oil. But they declared oil national security in the early 90s, and the reason was we were already importing 88% of oil, and they projected it would be 98% of our oil in the year 2000. Well, as you can see, if you add up the oil imported in the United States here, it comes to 3.5 billion. And look at the countries they have listed here: Mexico, Venezuela, Nigeria, Iraq, Afghanistan. There's a whole bunch of countries here that we really don't want to Well, not Afghanistan. I misspoke there. Algeria, I think is what it says. But these countries really don't care about us. We're supporting our enemies. The other problem we have to look at is our energy production in electrical. We've gone from 1985 or 1980 of producing our own electricity in the United States to importing more and more electric generation through fossil fuels being imported into our country. We are now presently at about 36% of our electric grid is being produced by imports. A lot of this stuff you have to look at when you look at these charts is production and consumption. And then you have to look at imports. And see, the next chart I'm going to put up is going to show you. See, this one here shows you relative to the world, electrical production. And a lot of these stats aren't up to date because everything is constantly changing in the world. And it has become national security for every country in the world. Without energy, you do not have an economy. Here in the United States, 40% of our economy is energy, whether it's gasoline, transportation, electricity, manufacturing. Without it, none of the rest of the industry works. So you can see our electric grid becomes a very integral part of how we do business in the United States. Is it any wonder, with this kind of rate of imports growing every few years, this imported, that you can't manufacture here in the United States? What they've done is they've gone off of coal, they've gone to natural gas, and they've gone ahead and gone to fossil fuels. And these fossil fuels produce about as much electricity as coal does for 40 cents to the dollar. And as natural gas does 60 cents to the dollar. Recently, they've been trying to drive the price of natural gas down so that they can go ahead and produce here in the United States again. The problem is it doesn't go ahead and produce in the rest of the world where they don't care about the pollution, where they can produce product and manufacture. Now I want to go into my renewable and green energies, which is, as you can see, in 1960s, it was 2.9% of your electric grid. You can see now presently, or in this chart, 2005, it was 6.16 quadrillion, or 6% of your entire electric grid. And this included nuclear, geothermal, wind, solar, biofuels, and the like, and that's all it produced. So 94% was being produced by coal, natural gas, or fossil fuels. Now I'm going to show you the distribution of your energy being consumed. You can see we have commercial, residential, and transportation. Part of the problem with electricity is you're producing it, but you're not consuming it. It's static. It isn't saved. So, you know, this smart grid they're talking about, they're going about it backwards with the way they're talking about it. They want to go ahead and charge you for carbon emissions to go ahead and reduce your consumption, but they're still producing the same amount at the power plant. The problem is they have to send that power down the line so far, and it has to be brought to a certain level to reach that distance. Now I want to show you why this is integral to our economy. Why this electric grid is integral to our economy is the World Trade Index. Everybody talks about labor costs and blah, blah, blah. But you know, when you start talking about the labor costs, the logistics to move materials to a foreign country, to manufacture them there, and then to transport them back here for sale, you're really adding a lot of cost and a lot of pollution onto something that started right here in 1985 with Billy Clinton and GATT and NAFTA. It's